You are now listening to the Verified Phenoms podcast. In this show, we speak with individuals who have come from all walks of life and have overcome the mental limitations of imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and overthinking. Get your notebook ready and stay tuned to learn how you can win your mental battles and become a verified phenom as well. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Verified Phenoms podcast, where we are talking to real people that have really, truly experienced life. They've gone through challenges that they do not let them stop them, and they are continuously executing on everything that they have going on. But today we have with us Darrin Schenck. He's a former pro racquetball player, achieving a top 20 national ranking. After retirement, he switched to coaching and spent 14 years as the head coach at Arizona State University, in which he won a national championship. Darrin's career took a turn after a head-on collision with a drunk driver on the wrong side of the road. This crash pushed him to becoming a public speaker on his experience. Darrin, happy Wednesday. We finally got up here. Had some technical issues, but that's how life goes sometimes. We're going to continue to move forward. Thank you so much. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. Glad to be here.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here today. So real quick, just a question, just to open this up with a conversation today. How did you get here? Like, what is your story? What are you passionate about?
Well, depending on how far back you want to go, but I'll keep it brief. I live in Phoenix. I've been here for quite almost 40, just over 40 years now. So I'm native by Arizona standards. But as you kind of touched on, my big pursuit early in my life was to see how much I could maximize my athletic potential as a pro racquetball player. I started out wrestling in high school, but that quickly got derailed after an injury that incurred, and ended up pursuing racquetball after that. And it kind of was a lot like wrestling in the sense that it was a very individual sport. I could practice an awful lot of things on my own. Not a ton of equipment to buy, so that was good too, because I don't come from a wealthy family and didn't have a coach, 3 days a week when I was growing up and learning how to do this. So it was a really, looking back on it, it was a really great pursuit for me because it really taught me a lot of independence and a lot of autonomy, but also how to ask for help and learn from as many other people as I could. And so I parlayed that, not only hard work on my own, but assistance that I did get eventually into a professional career where I played for 6 years on the International Racquetball Tour and reached a career high ranking of number 18 in the world for 3 of those 6 years. So after that, I switched over to coaching. It took a little time off. I needed a break from the game, switched over to coaching, and that still is the most personally rewarding thing I've ever done. I got the opportunity to inherit a club of kids that were already pretty talented. They just needed a little bit of guidance. And in my first year, we won a women's national championship. My men's team was number 5 overall. We were number 2. We were number the 2 team in the country. Everything after that was downhill. Just had the right chemistry with the right team in that first year. And then the next year was probably my best coaching overall, because our number 1 girl did not return that next year. And yet the girls team still finished second without the prior year's strongest player. So from a coaching perspective, that was probably my best coaching work in general. But the big thing that I really figured out early, and I'm glad I did, was that I was teaching life skills disguised as racquetball lessons. So I got the opportunity to work with about 500 kids during my 15 years total there at ASU. And some of them I'm still very, very close with. Been to a few weddings. Just went to lunch with 2 of the guys that used to be on the team here recently. Just a tremendous experience. And I got the opportunity to be a mentor, not only on the court from a competitive athlete standpoint, but a lot of those skills transfer right over into daily life as well. And so eventually I had to break down and get a real job, and retire from my racquetball career. And the coaching thing was completely volunteer, but I don't regret a moment of it because it was the best thing I ever did, for sure.
Oh man, I love that. You realized that you weren't teaching them racquetball skills. you were teaching them life skills.
Yeah.
There are so many things I feel as if that are hidden within jobs, sports, things of that nature. There's always so much to learn about life within that process. What were some of one? What was the moment that you realized that you were truly teaching them life skills? And what were some of the skills that you were teaching them that you realized like this can really translate to them, and 10 years from now they can still be using this lesson that we're going
Yeah, anytime you're under competitive stress or any kind of stress, some people fold, some people freeze up, some people excel, right? And you don't always have to be at your absolute best under pressure. You just have to be a little better than the person you're competing against, right? Especially in racquetball where it's one on one or two against two. You don't have to always be 100% your absolute peak experience best every time. You just have to manage that situation as best you can. Sometimes that's being in a really tight match with somebody who's very, very even with you as a player. Sometimes it's facing somebody who's better, or sometimes it's managing the fact that I outclass the person that I'm paired against for this match, and yet I still have to go out there and do my job and not take it easy, not slack off, not build a lead and then kind of drift, just try to coast my way to the finish line. So those type of coping mechanisms that we work on as athletes transfer into everything else: job interviews, first dates, stressful situations in life in general. All of that I have learned through my athletic career and then transferred over into my life. I'm the VP of sales for the company that I work for in my day job, and so now I'm very, very comfortable. Thank you. Um, Walking into a boardroom full of decision makers for a major insurance company or a Fortune 100 company, because I know everything there is to know backwards and forwards about what my company does and how we do it. But in the beginning, that wasn't the case. And it took a while to really build the confidence. So I relied on those same skills that I learned myself and that I was helping my athletes learn as well. And it sounds funny, but I'm sure you will agree with this. It's an overlooked thing that most people don't give enough credit to. But controlling your breathing when you are under a stressful scenario is hyper critical to calming yourself down, remaining focused and in the moment, not dwelling on a bad call or something. You threw a suggestion out during a meeting to a client and they're like, oh no, that's not even close to what we need. It's like, okay, regroup and keep on going, right? Controlling your breathing and therefore your physiological responses is a big part of that. And that was something I definitely know I helped all the kids with. And I would have some of them tell me like, oh man, that job interview was so stressful, but I was doing what you told me. I was breathing through my nose and trying to relax, and that really, really helped. So those are the kind of things that are truly applicable everywhere in life that we learned on the court.
it's crazy that you say that. So I wanted to also touch on this when you said it earlier. I was just like, I'll circle back. When you said you got injured playing sports, right, and then you eventually found another sport, I had the very same similar experience where I was running track in college, well, cross country at the time, fractured my leg, wasn't able to run anymore, and now let's just say 5, 6 years later, I'm finally picking up another sport, and for me, that's boxing.
Wow.
And yeah, completely different from running cross country, right? um, but to relate what you're just saying, in boxing, for me, I had to truly get control of my breathing. When you're in the ring, as anybody can imagine, you are in a high stress situation. Somebody is across from you, right, within your circle, trying to hurt you. They're trying to knock your head off.
Yeah.
And if a person is not calm and collected, it will happen. All right. So
Yep.
the way that I've had to continue to grow as an amateur boxer is when I'm in those situations and it feels like I'm losing control, I truly just have to breathe. Because if I'm not breathing properly, I get gassed out, I get winded, and my
Oh
opponent
yeah.
can see that, and then they just start becoming more aggressive and all things of that nature. And that's something that, like you said, you can take that to a job interview. You can take that to any conversations that you're having. Even during my first TEDx talk, I was extremely
Yeah.
nervous. I never stepped on the stage before, so I had to literally just breathe when I got onto the stage.
Yep.
So it's funny that you say that. One thing I do want to ask you about is you were saying you said the word confidence. You were speaking on that a little bit, and I think that that is something that the audience sometimes may be struggling with, or just people in general, if we're being honest, is confidence. So, Darren, I had to ask you, somebody that has worked with so many athletes, and you're a VP of sales right now. How do you continuously gain confidence as you enter in new situation, new environments in life?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the really that's I would say I have a two-part answer. One, as you know, it comes from preparation. When you know you've done the work ahead of time, when you are fit enough and you've done the work, whether it's boxing or racquetball or whatever it may be, you've put in the hard miles and you know you've prepared and done everything you can do to be ready. That should build your confidence there. There's been a few times I was really lucky over the course of my career. I did not have very many injuries at all, but there was a few times where I knew I did not have the preparation before a tournament that I wanted, and my confidence was a little shaky going in because I just wasn't sure if I could do all the things that I normally rely on. So that's one thing. Definitely preparation, it leads right into confidence. If you've done the work, you can enter that arena, whether it's again an interview or an athletic competition, knowing that you're ready to go. And then the other piece, of course, is collecting the receipts of every time you do go out and perform at a high level and have success. That you, like you, most people know who David Goggins is, right? Like he talks about putting stuff in the cookie jar, right? Same idea. Like I have a mental version of that where it's like, oh yeah, I've spoken to the number 6 insurance company in the country, the number 6 Fortune 100 company in the country, who happens to be an insurance company. I walked into their boardroom, presented to a team of people, and yes, it was nerve wracking, and I was excited and nervous about it. But again, I did all the work ahead of time. I knew exactly what I was going to say. I controlled my breathing. I went in, I had success, and they've been a partner of ours for the last 6 years. So, that's kind of stuff you focus back on the next time I have a similar opportunity, and maybe it's not even quite as big as that one, and I go, oh, that's right, I've been here before, I know what I'm doing, I've performed and succeeded in this same scenario, I can do it again. So definitely a two-part answer. When you are getting started, you have to do all the work ahead of time, and then as you start to accrue the wins from doing the work, your confidence is going to follow right along with that.
So basically, sounding like preparation, and almost, if we're talking in the world of sports, film study, almost in a way, you're
Yep.
going back and finding out what you did well, and really making sure that you are almost duplicating and replicating that entire process or the results that you had before. Now, when you switch lanes, you're pivoting, um, and now you're a public speaker, right? The crash happens, and now you become passionate about speaking about that subject and just really sharing your message out to the world.
Yeah.
How are you building the confidence for that? Because not everybody is just like, okay, I'm just going to start speaking on every single random stage possible. Like, how do you grow your confidence with that and prepare?
So
Oh Lord.
I did definitely go back to my roots as an athlete and some of and my experience in the business world. But you'll appreciate this story, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners can identify with this. So after that crash occurred, I did the typical, we'll call it the typical guy thing, where I just tried to make that whole thing go away. Right? I settled with the insurance company. The car was totaled, so I got that replaced. Let's bury this in a box in the closet somewhere and never look at it again. Right? Let's just move on with life. That's not how things work, right? So I had to dig that out and open the box and start dealing with it. And a friend of mine made the suggestion that why don't you reach out to Mothers Against Drunk Driving? Maybe they have some pamphlets you can read, or maybe you can tell your story, and that would be helpful to others and helpful to you as well. So I did. I reached out to the local chapter here in Phoenix, and this was actually during COVID, right when COVID was starting up. So I did it virtually, and they kept telling me when you get the chance to do this in person, it's going to be more difficult. But they had me do a practice run virtually and talk to a panel of volunteers that had that listened to people who wanted be a speaker and share their story. Now, being an athlete, I'm used to, performing in front of people, but public speaking is a little different. And I've been in sales for a long time, but normally my audience isn't bigger than about 6 or 8 people, right? So the first time I went to tell the story was at a hotel here in Phoenix that sponsored a one of the classes. When you get a DUI, you have to attend a class, and it's mandated by the court. So it is the definition of a captive audience, right? They have to be there. And so I listened to another speaker tell his story, and then he walked, did his part, walked back to the back of the room and exited. And then it was my turn. And I had put a couple of slides together. I had a photo of the car. I only have one picture from the crash of what my car looked like. But I was headed to go on a fishing trip with my dad. And he was already at the destination, and I was catching up with him when that crash occurred. So I have a picture of him and a picture of the racquetball team, because 3 weeks later we went to the national championships, and I easily could have missed that event because of a significant injury from the crash. Luckily, that was not my story. So I get up in front of the audience and I start telling the story, and I can just feel this wave of emotion building up in me because this has been trapped in me for a while. And I'm doing my best to hold it together and not just lose it in front of everybody. And I got to the end and I'm like, okay, everybody, thank you very much. And I grabbed my laptop and I started walking faster and faster towards the door. And I ran outside and threw up in the bushes. And it was like all of that emotion and stuff just came out all at once. And luckily nobody was around. And I apologized to the Hilton for puking in their bushes. But it clearly was a very cathartic thing for me. Like, as stressful as it was, I knew that I needed that. And then the next time I told the story, it was a little easier. And then the next time it was a little easier. And so now when I go and tell that story, there's still two parts that I get kind of choked up in. One is when my dad comes to pick me up at the tow yard and sees my car and how mangled it is. And my dad's not somebody that shows a lot of emotion outwardly. I'm much more of a softie than he is. And but he started crying and ran over to me and practically tackled me. And I had not shed a tear or anything up until that moment. Right after the car got towed to the tow yard, and the tow truck driver said, "Well, you can just wait here till your ride shows up." I'm sitting on the hood of my mangled car for about 20 minutes till my dad got there, and just kind of in shock, right? I'm just like numb. I really just trying to process what I had been through. But when he showed up and he was so shaken, I lost it. And I stood there crying like a child in my father's arms, 45 years old, but crying like a child, all of a sudden realizing that I'm thankful to be alive, and that, that I didn't die on the highway that day. And then the second part that gets me is when I call the woman who's now my wife, who was my fiance at the time, to tell her what happened and that we were coming home early. And I'm not a very good liar, and she knows it. And she started crying on the phone. And so when I got home, it was a repeat of the same thing with my dad. And so those two parts always get me in that story, even today, even though I've told that story a lot of times. So
Wow.
once I saw the impact I was having on the audiences, because after I didn't have to exit the room immediately, right? Once I got comfortable enough to actually, hang around and have people come up and talk to me afterwards, I realized how much impact that story was having, because 90% of the people in that class didn't get into an accident. They just got a DUI. They were lucky. They didn't harm themselves or anybody else. They're not going to remember all the stats that the instructor of that class taught them that night. But my goal is to have them feel to some degree what I felt, being the victim of somebody's bad decision to get behind the wheel after drinking, and easily could have ended my life. And when I get people that come up to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so thankful you're alive. Thank you for telling your story." When people ask, this is what I will share from the class. And that really inspired me to take that to a higher level. And so I pursued doing motivational and inspirational speaking as a public speaker. And that is one of the stories that I tell. I do some other topics as well, but that's one that I probably am most known for because it's truly unique to me. When I talk about, certain other things like leadership and sales, things like that, there's a lot of rehash of other ideas, but obviously this particular experience was 100% unique to me, and sharing that with audiences large and small has become a real passion of mine.
Mm. I love how you were truly able to take that experience and express it in a way that it impacts others. That's one thing that I love to touch on with creators in general, because every person has their own story. We all have something that we can share that can relate to other people in one way
Yeah.
or another. And you found that. So one, I want to say, well, let me backtrack. One, I want to say, very happy to hear that you're doing okay, like you're doing well, and of course that the accident could have gone worse, but we're glad that you're here with us today. Um, but two, I'm really happy to hear that you've been able to capitalize on that and share that message with the world, because a lot of people do not, they kind of just like internalize it, right? Almost like you were
Yeah.
saying earlier, like they just internalize what happened and you just push forward. So I want to ask you, for those that know that they maybe have a story in them or they have experience, it doesn't even have to be through speaking, or maybe it's through making YouTube videos, maybe it's through making music, whatever the way is to be able to express themselves. What advice would you give to somebody that knows that they have a message, but is maybe afraid to put it out in the world?
Be brave enough to share, right? Even if it's just with one person, somebody in your family or whatever it may be, or it turns out to be a large audience of people. Um, to your point, everybody's got a story, and there's always different takeaways and different lessons to be learned. And ideally, people are learning from others and not having to experience everything for themselves and then learn a lesson, right? And so, for me, having had some exposure to a public forum of coaching a team of people and again doing sales and sales presentations, it wasn't completely foreign to me to be up in front of an audience. But even if that's not a huge driver for somebody, I love it now. But even if that's not the end goal, just sharing your story, whether you do it through a blog or through an interview somewhere, or you write a book, right? I mean, that's a lot easier these days than it's ever been. Or just sit down and have a conversation with somebody about something you experienced and the takeaways. And I've learned a lot from sharing those stories with people and having people share different things with me. And in fact, last year I was the opening keynote speaker at the Kids Chance of America conference. And in the audience, somebody came up and said, this guy was shaking when he walked up to me. And I'm like, it can't be because he's intimidated by me. Like, I'm like, hey, man, are you okay? He's like, man, your story rattled me. And I'm like, oh, sorry. He's like, no, no, something really similar happened to me, but I did what you did right away. Was I settled with the insurance company, I got the car fixed, and I never talked about it again. And I still have a hard time driving at night, and I still have flashbacks, and this really bothers me to this day. And so I said, hey, can you hang out? I had a couple other people that wanted to chat with me. I'm like, can you hang out for a minute? Because I'd love to chat. And sure enough, after everybody left, he and I sat down and we spent 45 minutes together. And we both cried some tears and shared an amazing human moment. And he promised me, and he did follow through, that he was actually going to seek a therapist when he got home to talk about this event and really help him process it and move past it as best he could. It's always going to be there in his history and in mine, right? But I have done my best to make the absolute best outcome out of a very unfortunate scenario. And therefore, it's strange to say this, but I don't regret what happened. But believe me, I am so thankful that I climbed out of that car with this tiny little scar on the back of my left hand that you probably can't even see, and an abrasion on my beautiful bald head here from the airbag, and that was it. That was it. And the other guy, when the paramedics showed up, they thought he had a head injury. He was just that intoxicated. So
Mm,
that crash could have been much worse. We both could have died. I could have died. I could have been wedged in the car for 45 minutes till the paramedics got there and
mm,
bled to death or something. Who knows, right? So anytime you have a story that has an impact on your life, it has value to somebody else. And whether that's obvious to who the person needs to hear that story, or maybe it's a group at church that you volunteer to get up and talk in front of a room full of people, and two people ended up being really impacted by that. To me, karmically, we all owe that to help one another as much as we can. So again, to your original question, be brave enough to share, and if it turns out to be something that you benefit from and enjoy, then by all means do it on the largest level that you can.
We're going to get back to the show in just a second. But in the middle of your journey to create, innovate, and lead, you probably found yourself facing challenges of creative blocks or stuck in the cycle of overthinking. Here's the thing, you aren't the only one experiencing this. So why should you go through this journey alone? What if there was a community of like minded individuals all striving towards success, ready to support, motivate, and hold you accountable? Well, I have the solution for you. A place where ambition meets action, where your dreams get a roadmap, and where every single stride gets celebrated. We're more than just an online community. We're a collective of creators, freelancers, and entrepreneurs who believe in the power of togetherness to overcome obstacles and achieve greatness. Joining this online private community means that you're not just setting your goals, but also taking decisive steps towards them, with a community ready to cheer you on with every step of the way. It's about consistent progress, shared learning, and the taste of achievement. If you're ready to elevate your journey, to transform your ambitions into achievements, and be part of a collective that believes, then achieves, visit verifiedphenom.com to take action today. That's verifiedphenom.com. I believe we can definitely tell that you've been a vessel, right? A spokesperson for a lot of people that have heard your story. It's moved many people, as we just heard from the individual that you got a chance to speak, have that 45-minute conversation with. And there have probably been tens and hundreds of others, thousands that maybe haven't even come up to you, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
They hear it and it's just like, man, that hit, and they go home and they probably tell somebody else about it. I want to
Yeah,
flip the script for a second.
sure.
What have you experienced hearing somebody else speak, hearing somebody else's story that had that impact on you?
Well, what I mean this in the nicest way, but
Okay.
I've heard some people speak that I was not overly impressed with. Paid speakers who are in front of a large audience with a big opportunity that I was not, wow, that guy was amazing or that woman was incredible. Like it's like anything else. There's levels to the game, right?
Mhm.
I'm still learning a lot. I have a speaker coach for all of last year and a few more sessions yet this year, in effort to try to improve my craft and get to a higher level at what I'm doing. So that's something to keep in mind, right? I When I look back at the first talk I did, it was terrible. Now I look back at it and laugh. And 2 years from now, I'll look back on the me of today and laugh too, right? That's just the progression. So don't let that stuff hold you back for sure. But for me, one of the big things that I always look for in any talk that I listen to, or even like as a podcast, I listen to a lot of podcasts too, like something that's actionable. Like it's cool to listen to Elon Musk on the Joe Rogan podcast, right? But how much of that is really an actionable thing for me, right? And I love David Goggins. I've read his books, and you know, um, I'm trying to figure out how to download his new alarm so that wakes me up every morning, right? But you know, the, it there's lots of things that guy does that I don't want to do, right? Like I have a day job and I don't want to run 240 miles through the desert or anything like that. But um, if I can boil it down to an action item, such as here's a reason, or when you're struggling with something, here's something to think about, and reframe it this way, because that helps me and that might help you. And as someone listening to somebody on stage, for example, like that's what I'm looking for, is an actionable item that I can plug in to my own life. And I've tried to incorporate that into each one of my talks, where not just share the story, but again, make it clear that here's what I hope you take away from this. And then also leave it open to, whatever else you whatever else you interpreted out of this, I hope you benefit from as well. But sometimes kind of spoon feed the audience with, here's the major points I was trying to cover, because I've listened to some speakers do a really good job of that. And I don't want to miss the chance to make sure to just, hammer that point home that, hey, this is what I was trying to share today. Yeah, the crash was significant, but here's what I really meant. I took something bad and turned it into something fantastic. That's the real takeaway, right?
Hmm. I want to continue just a little bit about action, taking action, execution. I believe you've already answered this question as you've been going. I think earlier while we were doing the show. But I just want to clarify so people can are listening to this take the action step away from it. For those that are possibly struggling to get their message out, they know they have a message, but they don't know how to get it out. Would you say that one action step for them is to just tell at least one person?
So everybody struggles, right? It's interesting to me, especially on the coaching side of what I do, how often I talk to somebody that thinks they're the only one that's struggling with something. So, for example, if we were doing this on Saturday, the review of my week would have been: I visited my dad in the hospital twice. He's getting out today, thank goodness. I had a doctor's appointment for a hernia this morning. I'm going to a funeral of my two best friends' parents tomorrow. That's been some of my week. And it weighs a little heavily on me at times. My dad's getting to that age where, we may have already taken our last fishing trip together, or maybe the next one is the last one, right? But any and all of that is part of life. And so don't ever think like you're on an island, or that this whatever set of problems that you're dealing with is unique to you and that no one would possibly understand. You do have to choose wisely who you share things with, because even somebody who's well intended might hear half of your story and go, "Oh, okay, I got it. This is exactly what you need to do." And that's really not what you wanted to hear, right? So be smart about who you decide to open up to. And sometimes maybe it's the Uber driver that you'll never see again, and he's stuck in the car with you for 20 minutes. It's like, okay, dude, sorry to do this, but I got to unload this thought that's on my head, on top of my head, right? Or it might be someone that's very close that will sit and listen and then talk with you about it later. But the biggest struggle that I think so many people have is that they always think or assume that this is just me. Like, I should be able to handle this stuff, or these are everyday things that most people seem to do just fine with. And for some reason, it's a heavy burden for me. I got news for you. Everybody struggles. Everybody's got things that they can handle, and those same people have things that just knock them for a loop. And so, again, give yourself a little bit of leeway. Understand that it's not just you, and that there's a lot more people that would at least empathize, if not truly sympathize, what you're dealing with, and might be able to help.
Mm. We all experience life on a certain level. Sometimes we don't realize that we have shared experiences. Mm. When it comes to being a public speaker, because this wasn't something that maybe, well, I don't know, that you weren't thinking about, let's just say 40 years ago, right? You weren't like, oh yeah, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to be a public speaker, motivational speaker, inspire the world. And for some, even though they know that they have something to talk about, they may believe that they shouldn't be a speaker. They shouldn't be on stage somewhere. Was there ever a moment for you that you felt imposter syndrome, where even though you knew you had a message to tell, but maybe you didn't belong on a stage?
It That's easy to fall into, especially when it's something new. The benefit that I had with my background is that I felt a lot of that during my racquetball career. Like there, I'll save the nitty gritty details of my life on the pro tour, but in the first round matchup, I would be paired against somebody that I was evenly matched with, and then we would play, and the winner would play into one of the top four in the world, and that gap was huge. And so every time I won a match, my reward was to go be on the center court in front of the biggest audience of the weekend, getting worked over by the number one player in the world, right? And I knew I didn't really belong on that court, but that was just the format of the tournament, right? And so the first time I did it, I just sucked. Like I got rolled over. I was overwhelmed by the moment. I didn't perform. Luckily it was quick. But then the next time I remembered, okay, I don't have anything to lose here. So if I can go out there and just kind of do my best, what I'm capable of, that'll be good enough for tonight. I'm not going to win, but if I can at least have a decent showing, hit a few good shots, I'll feel better about it. Well, applying that to speaking, again, the first time I got up in front of an audience and spoke, I'm sure my voice was shaky. Again, I was overwhelmed with the emotion of telling the story of the crash for the first time. And then I hustled out of the room and ran outside and threw up, right? So the imposter syndrome is always something that it, I guess that, I'm going to change directions here mid sentence.
Okay.
It's a good thing, because if you are stretching and challenging yourself in a situation where you're not sure you're quite ready, you're in exactly the right spot. Think of it that way, because if the one of the things that I live for in my day job is a really big opportunity with a big company, because anything short of that has just kind of been routine. And it wasn't in the beginning, but I've gotten used to it. And all of the excitement and the concerns and the fears are now gone, unless it's somebody really big. Speaking, puts me in that uncomfortable situation frequently, because sometimes it's a very large audience and I get a last minute, like this happened to me not too long ago, where I was literally walking up on stage, and I was being introduced, and the event manager ran over and said, "By the way, make sure you touch on this." I'm like, wait a minute, that wasn't in my talk. Like, I sent you
Right.
what I was talking about. And so he threw me a last second curveball. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I had to sit with it for a second and figure out how I was going to wedge that into my talk. And that really made me nervous, because I had a very set plan that I was going to follow. And now this happened, right? I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not prepared for this. But I pulled it off. I got some great results and reviews from that, and they were very happy with it. And they're going to have me come back to their franchisee event next year as well. Um, that felt like a real imposter moment, where I was like, "Whew, man, I maybe somebody else that you've hired, handled that better than I did, but I wasn't sure I could do that." Turns out I could. I just needed to have a little bit of belief, breathe my way through it, and go do it. And again, I did it to the best of my ability. If he does it to me again next year, I'll be a little more prepared. But at least I gave myself a chance to have some level of success in that area, and I did. But again, if you reframe that to be to think that, okay, if I'm worried about this, I'm in the right place, that helps alleviate some of those concerns, because you are taking one more step up on the ladder of growth, which is necessary for improvement.
Oh man. So let me make sure I'm following everything so far. So we we have, in order to build your confidence, you have prepare, and also make sure you kind of review, prepare and review, see what you've done well before, capitalize on that. Imposter syndrome is something that is quite normal, that we all deal with and will continue to deal with. That lets us know that we're in the right spot. We're challenging ourselves. We're leveling up. And if we're ever in a situation like you were saying, you're stepping on the stage, getting some stuff thrown at you, whether you're in a stressful situation or it's a new situation, you just pause, take a deep breath. That way you can really gather your thoughts, gather yourself, and really center everything and just go do what you gotta do. Am I following correctly so far? That's what it's, that's what it sounds like. I'm trying to make sure I have these action steps for everybody to take home with them.
Yeah.
Amazing. But were you about to say something?
So I have a quick
Go
question
ahead.
for you. So how long
Hit
was your
me.
TED talk?
It seemed like forever.
Yeah, I know, but how
it
long was
was
it really?
it was like 8 minutes.
I was going to say, it's like probably like, yeah, 10, 12, 15 minutes at the most,
Yeah,
right? That feels like forever.
yeah.
And the hard part, as you know from doing that, is that initially 8 minutes seems like, oh my gosh, I don't have enough to talk about. And then you start doing it and you realize, oh my gosh, my practice run was 20 minutes and somehow I got to get this down to 8 minutes, right? And so you start weeding out all of the word salad stuff and everything that's unessential and get it down to the essence of what you do or what you wanted to share. And so again, the it's like anything else, right? The confidence comes from practice. The imposter syndrome means that you're stretching yourself and you're in the right place, but doing the homework, doing the prep work in the background, really being a master of your craft, whether it's one story or many, is the art of doing public speaking, right? It is truly a skill that not everybody initially possesses. I think lots and lots of people, lots more people could do it than actually do it. Like here, perfect example. My wife's an ER nurse. She would rather run out to an ambulance and stick a finger in a bullet hole wound as they wheel somebody into the ER than get up in front of an audience of 12 people and tell a story, right? I don't want to stick my finger in anybody's bullet wound. Thank you. So, what we're afraid of and what intimidates us is very individualized. But as you know, public speaking is a very very common fear for lots of people. And what it really boils down to is not the public speaking part; it's the public humiliation part. It's going up there in front of a whole bunch of people and freezing up and just getting laughed off stage or whatever it may be. And unfortunately, lots of people have that as a childhood memory from, fifth grade when you had to do a book report in front of the class and it didn't go as well as you wanted. And you were stumbling with your words a little bit. And a couple of people in the back were kind of laughing and snickering. And you took that so personally, like, I'll never do that again. Right. And then you're the one that has to give the toast at your sister's wedding. And it's like, it's a terrifying experience, all because of that one experience forever ago. It's just ingrained in your head that this is something I never want to do again. Right. So, job interviews are selling yourself and presenting to people, even if it's just like a panel interview of 4 or 5 people. There's all kinds of opportunities in life to practice and hone this kind of skill. And if you're just a little bit braver than other people, you can be the one that gets the opportunity that a whole lot of other people may not ever get.
Mm. Yes. I'll even speak on this real quick because we're wrapping up here today. For me, public speaking, interviewing was I never imagined I would be doing stuff like this because I even used to go to speech therapy a little bit when I was a child, and so as I grew up, I was like, yeah, get in front of the room, like you said, book report. I'm good. Please, no, thank you. I'm fine. But I realized I started being more intentional, excuse me, with the jobs I was doing, the skills I was building, and so I ended up being part of like an MLM where I would give 5 minute teaching lessons, and then it ended up being like 10 minute teaching lessons. And I ended up teaching for like an hour live, like 100 people up there. Got comfortable with that. I ended up getting
Yeah.
a job after that teaching elementary school students. And boys, listen, kids will let you know how they feel. I think that built my skin so thick with
Yeah.
just speaking in front of people because they either love me or they were literally running around this classroom not paying attention. After that, I don't care what adults do. Like it doesn't matter to me. I've seen the kid running around me while I'm trying to give a little speech to them. And now I'm to the point, in addition to the podcast that you all are listening to, I teach college students, and I'm up there for like an hour and a half. Even today was the first day of classes, like I was telling you before we got up here, and I was like, man, what am I about to do up here for an hour and a half? Went up there, just after I've gotten so many reps in, right? Like we talk about so
Yeah.
many reps in of just speaking and just captivating the audience for an hour and a half. I get off. I have 15 messages on LinkedIn, like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to take your class. And that's all because of repetition, growing, seeing what a person has done well, taking it day by day. So I can definitely align with you on that. But wrapping up here today, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
What was the moment for you where your mindset just completely shifted?
Well, if we're going to stay focused on the crash piece as a major life event and mindset, um, it's interesting how many different things this shift impacted in my life. So I kind of had a victim mentality when that occurred. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. I was the victim of somebody's bad decision to get behind the wheel and be involved in that crash. It was an inconvenience dealing with the car and the insurance and all that stuff. It scared the heck out of me, and I just wanted to put it behind me. That's not the right mindset to have, right? Everything happens for a reason. And even something as, difficult to deal with as this, now looking back on it, it has been a very transformative thing for me. And again, I've worked hard to make as much of that scenario into a positive for me as possible. So I couldn't tell you the exact date, but there was a time about 2 years after the crash where I was sitting alone, not really doing anything in particular, and all of a sudden I just heard and felt a pop inside my head, and all of those thoughts and feelings came flooding back all at once, and I realized that I had built a dam trying to hold all that back for all this time, and I just let it go. And I didn't really have the emotional experience that I was kind of expecting at that moment. It just was kind of like the dam burst and everything flooded out, and I was empty again. But now that I was empty, I can refill that in a better fashion, right? Like, the famous Bruce Lee quote of, be like water, right? Like, whatever water gets put into, that's the shape that it takes. When the dam burst, I rebuilt that and started filling it from the other perspective, not the victim perspective, but somehow this needs to be an empowering thing for me. How can I turn this around and make this a better scenario? And one of the first things that I dealt with was I got the check from the insurance company and bought a 1 year newer version of the same car that I was in. Well, that had repeated or continued a process of me not managing my money as well as I should and racking up a bunch of debt. So I sold that car and took a hit on it. I lost money by selling it, but I bought a beat up old Forerunner and drove that for 4 years and got another job and started working on paying off all the debt that I had. That was one facet of making that mindset shift into something new, right? And I guess one way to look at it is that crash rattled me out of my usual competitive and somewhat feeling invincible mindset that I had as an athlete. It made me feel very vulnerable. And I stayed in that mindset for almost 2 years. And then on that day when the dam burst, I got back to thinking competitively again and believing in myself that, hey, you can turn this around. You don't need to have this view of that circumstance for the rest of your life. In fact, if you do, it's really going to hold you back. And so I started to take some action, and becoming debt free was part of that, and seeking some help by reaching out to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, not even knowing where that was going to lead, but at least finally doing some outreach on my own behalf to try to find some answers has led me down a path that I never would have expected. And here I am today doing, public speaking and self-optimization coaching and helping as many people as I can. And you can trace all that back to that fateful day on March 8th when that car crash occurred.
Darrin, lastly, how can people find you and how can they support you?
So I'm trying to make a lot more noise these days. I'm seeking out an intern to help me with all my social media stuff because I don't do a great job of that. But I'm active on LinkedIn, and it's just my name. Or I have two actually have two LinkedIn accounts. The easiest one to find probably is Coach Darrin, and then also my website at darrinschenck.com. Those are the two easiest ways to find me. And pretty soon I should have an intern and have somebody helping me with, making more noise on the social media channels and doing a better job of promoting myself. For example, with the opportunity you've given me here to be on your podcast, I just have not ever gotten very good at or diligent with taking an opportunity like this and cutting it up into bite-sized pieces and pushing it out on my own social media. But I'm getting better, and I'm going to recruit some help so I get even better at it, and start making myself a lot more available to anybody that's willing to either have me come talk or want to talk to me about something that I might be able to help them with.
Amazing, Darrin. Again, thank you so much for your time today. I
My
know,
pleasure. Thank you.
of course, I know everybody listening has gained some wisdom, gained some knowledge, got some steps to take home with them, some notes, all things of that nature, so they can just get 1% better. Y'all, I am your host Phenom, and this has been another episode of Verified Phenoms, and we will catch you all on the very next episode. See ya.
Thank you.